Hello everyone, Jack Etchman here from Scootertrix Studios, and I am back to do another commentary of Scootertrix the Abridged, this time for episode 23, the Big Applejack episode. So before I begin the episode itself, I want to talk a bit about, I guess, kind of the background of this episode, just because it's kind of I have a lot to say on this one. So, this episode was kind of the bane of my existence for a while, just because it's just so difficult to figure out how this episode was going to work and how everything was going to tie together. And then when we were actually making the episode, there was just a whole other slew of problems. So yeah, this has probably been the most difficult episode to make of Scootertrix the Abridged. Also, to date, the most expensive episode to make of Scootertrix the Abridged. Yeah, so to begin, basically I had two goals with this episode. One was to reveal finally the mango backstory, and why Applejack said that the apples were mangoes. And two, to reveal to Applejack that Apple Bloom was a general. So for those, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but the whole mango thing, we didn't have a plan for that in the very beginning. When I first wrote that was just a joke. It was just a gag. And after a while, when the series kept on going, I was like, I have to actually find a reason why. Otherwise, it's just kind of this weird, random thing. So I essentially shot myself in the foot, and this episode is me pulling that bullet out. In the beginning, I tried to write this episode, and I was kind of coming to a bunch of dead ends because, you know, with all the stuff, with my two goals in mind, it had to be an Applejack episode. But this episode didn't focus on Applejack. It focused on the CMC. And so I had to try and kind of figure out how that would work out. So I sent the script to my father, and I said, "Can you write this, please?" He's like, "Okay." And so he starts writing it, and he writes, he literally writes 3 different drafts over time. Cause he does a first draft, we look at it, I'm like, let's do something different. He writes a second draft, I'm like, kind of better, but let's do something else. Then he does a third draft, which looks pretty good, and then I come in and then kind of write or rewrite some of it, or, you know, add stuff on, kind of tweak some stuff. So a lot of this episode is him from the writing standpoint, and this is probably a good point to actually start the episode here. So yeah, so one of the biggest problems, well, not the biggest problem, but it was certainly a huge delay for this episode, was finding a guest star for this one. And we finally got AC Racebest, who it was great working with him. And he said he had never done voice acting before, but I thought he did really well here. He fit the character perfectly. But yeah, it literally, I went up and asked, I think, a good like 6 people to do Granny Smith to voice act, and they all turned it down eventually. It was just, I don't know, the voice acting portion of this took 2 months. It delayed the episode by 2 months. This scene was completely my dad's doing. He wrote this whole scene.
I was expecting her cutie mark to be a hammer or something. That's me. Out the door. I'll see you soon, Granny. Call me Pie Meister. No.
Yeah, the Pie Meister, that was him.
Huh. What's this?
Oh my god, that shot took forever. I literally had to clean up spilled juice from that floor in Photoshop and then put a scroll on it just to get that in there. Yeah. So what I eventually planned to do, well, the solution to the problem of this is an AJ episode and it's focused on the CMC, was to have the episode focused on backstories. You know, because the CMC go and, you know, hear everyone's backstories, but then the final backstory, the most important one, would be AJ's. So
Loser says what? What?
that's kind of how we
Which one?
went about that.
Cavalry's like literally all we have.
I love that joke with the cavalry. Send in the cavalry. Which one? And then going back to the Celestian Luna scene real quick. So that was almost cut for time. And I did cut a lot out of this episode. I cut at least 30 seconds worth of stuff from this one. I think every scene in this one has something cut in it. But I fought hard to keep it because I needed some extra humor in there, because this is kind of a dark episode.
No, but let me tell you something, man. I remember when I first got
So, well, this Fluttershy scene, this is one of the first things that kind of stuck. I think this was maybe even in the first draft, and the whole gag with the morph.
So I decided to go down and see the mainland.
Fluttershy had a, or young Fluttershy had a line here, but that was cut for time. See, this episode was kind of tricky because I had to come up with backstories for everyone. And it's like, I didn't have a whole lot of time to establish, like, really intricate backstory, so I kind of had to just go with what the footage had. I'm like, do this. So this scene, I really dreaded editing. I knew it was gonna suck because there's just a lot of moving parts in it, and it's really hard to edit all the moving parts and stuff moving, and I don't know. I love that music. I love how that turned out. It was great. Oh yeah. Well, okay, so with editing the scene, it's like, ironically, it was actually one of the easiest scenes to write because everything just kind of fell into place. And this was actually the first scene that was completed for this episode. Another cut off of the swear there. Twilight's backstory was pretty long. I was surprised. I think she has the longest backstory here, aside from AJ's. And I tried to cut as much of it out as possible, but, I mean, after a while I was like, I had to keep most of it. I cut some stuff out, but I had to keep most of it.
Now bask in my greatness.
So the bask in my greatness line. So that was added in after this episode was completed. I sent it off to the patrons, and that was one of the suggestions, was to have that line in. So that was added in. That was one of the last things to be put in there. It was not in the original script.
What is your name, child? Twilight. Twilight Sparkle. Twilight Sparkle. You are gifted with the ways
Twilight Sparkle. You are gifted with the ways of magic.
And I have been her loyal student ever since.
There was more dialogue here.
Where'd they go? Everyone and their mother has a backstory.
So that shot right there implies that they went to Rarity's house to get her backstory, but we already know her backstory, so this scene was longer. And then this, yes. I know a couple people were upset that there was no Bird's backstory. Well, there might be something more intricate in the works for a possible backstory, maybe. So the whole explanation of why the letters, like, tell them the backstory, I don't know. It's okay. I personally think it's kind of lazy. It's like, oh, we have someone who trolls, let's just have her trolling. I'm like, I couldn't think of anything else, though. And I was just frustrated by the episode at that point. So in episode 22, I had this beautiful formula where you would have comedy through the entire episode, except at the end you'd have this little spike of drama. And then after the spike, you'd also have comedy. So the spike of drama would really pop out because, it's just surrounded by comedy. And it's beautiful. This episode tried to do the same thing, except it was kind of more half and half. It was half comedy, half drama. Because I think this conversation is literally like 5 minutes. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think what I should have done was made this all a drama. And made all the tone consistent. Because I don't think it works where it's just a depressing ending. Instead of just I don't know.
She's a general? Yes. What?
This scene was hard to write. My dad and I went over this one over and over again, trying to get everything right, because the conversation had to morph from Apple Bloom being a general to the mango thing. And, and then we had to, like, figure out how the mango thing made sense, and it's just a nightmare, and I'm like, okay. I'm glad this episode is done and out there.
I know. We live in an orchard. I know. Then why did you say there were mangoes? Because they couldn't be apples.
And so this whole scene right here is pretty much custom made. Almost every shot is a green screen pony on a background. And so Atomic did a ton of stuff on this episode. He was really the MVP here. I like how he blurred the background too. Oh, see, fun fact, that shot with the where Applejack is like the window behind Applejack. So that right there. So that's like that's supposed to be nighttime, but I put a little picture of a daytime outside just to make it look just to keep with continuity. So there's a lot of little stuff like that just to make shots look more just to make the shots make sense, I guess.
Why did you never tell me this? Applejack,
I remember watching a live reaction, and in the comments everyone was going, "Oh my god, this is so sad." And I'm like, "Yes! It worked."
And sometimes to protect those we love. I don't want you to think of her like that. She was a wonderful pony. She just got it wrong.
So the ending scene. So this was always in the plan for this episode, and originally I wanted the music, The Sound of Silence, for this one. And as I got closer and closer to the release date, I was like, no, I can't do The Sound of Silence because it's a copyrighted music. I can't use it. So I just composed something else, which I think turned out pretty good. So, no complaints from me.
Rarity.
And then a lot of people were confused at that. So Applejack goes to Rarity because she's gonna apologize. Like that was what I was implying there. But a lot of people were kind of confused on that. And then the credits, I actually heavily debated on having the credits silent as a kind of, I don't know, it would just kind of keep with the tone. But last minute, I kind of chickened out, and I'm like, I think it's just gonna be too cheesy. So I put the ending credits in, which looking back, I probably should have made the credits silent. Yeah, but anyway, so that was episode 23. It was a nightmare to make. Bane of My Existence kind of had a lot of problems, a lot of delays. It's not my favorite episode ever, but I think it's okay. It's a good episode. I think it had some great moments. Definitely the animation at the end. Oh, I forgot to talk about the animation. Okay, so the animation, so that's from the Brutal Weather team, who I think have the absolute best pony accurate animations ever. So the Brutal Weather team, and it's a specific guy. I think it's EgegokProChannel, I believe. But anyway, I'll link him in the description. Go and check him out. He does commissions. Absolutely fantastic work. Loved what he did. So anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.